Thank you everyone for joining us this morning, this afternoon, wherever you are in the world. Today, we're going to be covering the topic of safety first, strategies to implement to protect your listings. So a little bit about me first, because I know you guys are all wondering, who's Paul Zukowskis? Well, I am the Regional VP of Customer Success at Guesty. So essentially, I cover both North and South America for Guesty. And manage a local customer success team and onboarding team in the United States. We are joined by a distinguished panel today. From Safely, we have their CEO, Andrew Bate. From Autohost, we have the co-founder and CPO, Ella Mizhiborsky. And from ABODEbucks, a PMC, we have the Director of Operations, Josh Sedevy. So thank you all. Thank you to all of our panelists for joining us, and we really look forward to kind of hearing from you later. A little bit about what we'll do today. We'll have our opening words. I'll present a little bit about what Guesty is seeing kind of in the market and how it's turning around. Then we'll hear from Andrew, Josh, and Ella, and then we'll handle a couple of stock panel questions. And from there, we'll move into our Q&A session. So a little bit about what Guesty is seeing from travel and what we're seeing or hearing from our PMCs. So if you haven't seen it, reach out to somebody on this panel or reach out to Guesty. Our marketing team did a great job of surveying over 500 PMCs, and we're constantly kind of looking at the data and our reservation kind of information that's flowing into us. And what we've seen so far already early on in 2021 is that Memorial Day reservations are up 71% over last year. Makes sense. July 4th reservations are 50% higher, but this last metric is the one that I'm really excited about, which is we're already seeing 110% higher demand for this upcoming summer than we did in 2019. Not 2020, not a COVID year, but 2019. And having spoken to a lot of our PMCs, what I know to be true is that they're offering their summer units at a much higher rate than they were in 2019. So we're seeing them kind of expand their rates beyond just 100%, but going into 150 and 200% and still getting a lot of reservations there. So things that we want to make sure that we're doing and continuing, right? So 2020 brought us a lot of challenges, but with it, it brought a lot of growth in kind of focus areas for us as STR operators and for our PMCs. And what we found is that flexible bookings, light touch stays, strict cleaning requirements, longer stay amenities, as well as better operational increased guest communications have been areas where the entire industry has really taken off and kind of grown in its operations and in its approach. And we see these things continuing forward throughout 2021. So how do you do all those? Well, enter the Guesty platform. For some of those who aren't aware, Guesty is an end-to-end solution that helps automate complex operational tasks. And we help manage inventory, flexible inventory from urban type of multi-unit inventory into vacation homes, mid-stay and long-term stay and beyond. So Guesty is a very, very flexible platform, and we've surrounded ourselves with one of the most robust marketplaces in the space. And accommodating us today is Autohost and Safely. They're in our marketplace, as well as kind of these direct integrations with a lot of the top OTA players, which we have preferred partnerships with. And so we offer ourselves as a one-stop shop for all of your PMC needs. All right, so as I mentioned earlier, we have Andrew, Ella, and Josh with us today. Thus concludes my end of the presentation. I'll be back for the panel questions, but now let's start hearing a little bit from our panelists.
Thank you, Paul, for the kickoff. We're safely.com, and this is who we are. We're 9 of us based in Atlanta. If you've seen us out in public, we're wearing orange vests because our whole mission is to protect your business and keep things safe. Since 2015, we've covered over $50 billion of homeowner and property manager liability. So this team gets a lot done. But the reason we're here, our whole mission is to help your homeowners feel comfortable with this weird new trend of renting to internet strangers. Before a homeowner thinks about renting, they need to know 2 things, and you have to help them with that. They need to know who's staying in my house, and they need to know that if something goes wrong, they're going to be taken care of. And that's the whole mandate. Like, all of us are here on this panel, all of us are here in this industry to help homeowners feel comfortable with who's staying in their house and what happens when something goes wrong. But we need help with that. We have Ella here to help. We're here to help. And really, it's because of this. We've all walked into this situation before, some variation of this. But what are you going to do? Like, clearly, this is a security violation. This is a safety violation, and everyone's mad. And the problem is, you need someone to help you with this, because if you try to go to your homeowner and ask them to help cover this or explain why it's fine, well, they think you're getting rich. You know, that commission you make, you're just rolling in the money. Like, how could you possibly charge your homeowner when it's your fault because you let a bad guest in, or you let a party happen in your home? And you can't go after the guest because, first of all, it's hard to collect from them, but also, they give you a bad review and now you're on page 7 of the OTA sites. And so, like, you really need a third party to help you get through this. And that's why we're here at safely.com. We help you turn those internet strangers who are coming through any booking channel into a trusted guest that your homeowners are comfortable coming into their house, using their kitchen, sleeping in their beds. And this is how we do it. First, we do a background check on the guest. In the United States, this is what we do. We verify the guest's identity. We check terrorist watch lists. We check sex offender lists. We check for felonies. Those are the worst crimes. And most importantly is we have a contributory database of bad guests. So people who have destroyed homes, just because they destroyed your competitor's home, they still should stay out of your home. And we help you identify those repeat offenders. And we actually believe that the best type of guest screening is coupled with insurance, because you back up the screening because you pay for any damage that takes place. And so we partnered with Guesty, and you should talk to your account manager about our damage waiver insurance program, where from $3,000, $8,000 of damage to the home's contents and structure is covered. And I'll get into that a little bit more in a second. But what that allows us to do is, if we know the guest at as they're making the reservation, and then we see how they perform, because we're paying out insurance claims and we're seeing what damage was caused. Well, there are similarities and there are traits of a bad guest, a high risk reservation. And that's what we built in our risk score. And this isn't new to any of you. You know that there are types of guests who are probably going to be trouble. And we've quantified that. Our data scientists have. We found that there's a category of guests. They represent about 14% of guests who are causing 70% of our bad stays. And we define a bad stay as where the guest did something intentional. They had a party. They had 80 people in a 2-bedroom condo. They brought their pet in even though they said they had no pets. And so we really try to be proactive as well. And the data from our insurance helps us do that. Also, just a little bit about our insurance policy. We also like to pay really fast. We're paying 90% of our claims in 1.2 days. So it really is a program that's operationally efficient. And that's the other benefit of having the right trust and safety program in place, is your operations team, and Josh runs operations for his business. Your operations team can focus on hospitality and not like clean up and being a bouncer at your own homes. And so we've seen that property managers who really embrace the right trust and safety solutions, they cover all of their homes. They don't cherry pick. Their homeowners are happier, and their guests are happier. They don't have to fight with the guests. And this is, in this time of great growth, this is the benefit. This is what's allowing some property managers to steal share from their competitors or convince new homeowners to enter the market for the first time. So thank you for your time. I'm ready for the questions later.
Coming up next, I believe it is Josh.
Thanks, Paul. I am a property manager. My name is Josh Sedeby, and I'm the co-founder and director of operations for ABODEbucks. We're based here in St. Louis, Missouri. And we started in 2015, and since then we've serviced and managed over 150 properties. We are a full service property management company, so we take care of everything from cleaning and maintenance to nightly pricing and marketing each property. We also do the interior design for a lot of the homes. We've designed over 50 homes in the last few years. And we've booked over 28,000 nights and hosted over 8,000 reservations. And so we built, a good amount of data over the last 5 years that have helped us point to setting different policies and adapting some of today's best practices for making sure that our guests and the property owners are safe. What we do primarily, our goal is as a team is to represent our city, protect the homes and also the neighborhoods, to cultivate relationships by setting clear expectations with our clients, and basically just to serve. We're here to serve our guests and our owners and make sure that, we achieve 100% satisfaction as much as possible. Guesty has asked me to share a few of our best practices and tips and tricks that PMCs and professional hosts can use to ensure safety for owners and guests. The three things I'm going to touch on primarily is how we're handling COVID-19, how we use noise sensing devices to eliminate problem guests and keep our neighbors happy, and what types of insurance we use to make sure that if something does go wrong, we're still in good shape. The first thing has been the topic of the year, of course. It's had a huge effect on our industry, and that's COVID-19. There's always a silver lining with most negative things that happen in life and in business. And what we've figured out is by making sure that we keep our team and our guests safe, we've actually seen increases in occupancy and bookings over the last 6 months, even well into the COVID scenario of late last year, where there was a lot of cancellation still. The first thing we did was we made sure that our whole team is COVID cleaning certified. We signed up with a company called cleaningsertification.com. We're really, really happy with. It's a great 1 hour course that we have all of our team take. And the biggest thing that we learned, it's the very first thing they say, is if you treat every scenario as if you have COVID and everyone else does COVID, it's the best way to keep each other safe. So one of the things that they do is they give you a really detailed list of PPE that's going to help keep the team safe. And we've taken the certification recommendations and merged with some of the Airbnb recommendations and build a really great COVID cleaning checklist just to make sure that, there's a specific order of cleaning and disinfecting, as we go through the house and get ready. I can share that list and I'll give you my email address at the end of my presentation. If you'd like to have that, it's free. And then we developed a really good COVID symptom protocol, making sure that if guests or team members feel sick, we know exactly what to do and make sure that those things are taken care of so that more people don't get sick. And then we use, some of the federal guidelines as far as national paid sick leave to make sure that people don't feel like they have to come into work and get, other guests or team members sick. And we're recommending vaccinations, and we're moving right through our team with vaccinations, which is only going to help us get through this a little bit quicker. We use quite a few tools that Guesty offers to kind of nail down our COVID-19 policies. The first thing we do is we take our cleaning certification badge that we earn from the certification course, and we add them to our lead listing photo. We feel like that has helped to increase occupancy, and we've had feedback from guests that say that that's the reason why they chose our property. So that's been great. Of course, we describe what we do in the listing description. We're on board with Airbnb and Vrbo's policy compliance. And then we use Guesty's auto messages, auto replies, and check-in forms just to make sure that everyone is very clear on what we're doing to keep them safe from the time that they inquire to the time they check out. The next thing we do is we really, really love the noise sensor situation that we set up in this last year. We use Noise Aware. We're very happy with their services, and they do integrate with Guesty. So they can automatically reach out to guests that are partying even when we're sleeping 24/7. They already have access to who's there, what their phone number, what their contact or email address is, and they squash a lot of parties for us. Because honestly, and we all know this, rowdy guests are bad for business. Party guests destroy houses, upset neighbors can actually get your property shut down in a lot of cities. And then increases your workload. And it could, lead to extra city restrictions if your market is the government's hearing a lot of problems. Noise Aware is a good way to show to your community that you're doing your best to keep those parties to a minimum. And it also just, saves you a lot of time in cleaning and maintenance and claims and all that kind of stuff. We use Guesty's tools to make sure, first of all, we use Guesty's 24/7 communication services to help us enforce occupancy limits, which is the number one thing. If you tell somebody that not to have a party, it's up for discussion what that is. But if you really enforce your occupancy limits and tell them, what your rules are and make sure that they agree before booking, it really, really does help. And then we, make sure that we're, everybody's clear, full transparency, set expectations about, those noise sensors are in the property, what they do. And we use auto messages, auto replies in the check-in form just to make sure that they're clear. The third thing that we've added in the last 6 months or 8 months that we really, really love is Safely. Andrew's kind of told you all about it, so I don't really need to get into the nitty gritty, but we do love that we love the background checks. The insurance is fantastic. It's a huge upgrade in our opinion from using the typical Airbnb or Vrbo claims processes. The claims are quick. We have a little bit more time to make those claims, and we also can mark up the rate just a little bit to cover the administration costs of filing the claims and making sure that the property is, looking perfect for the next guest. We use Guesty's tools, very much like the others. We add a description in our listing, and then we use auto messages, auto replies, check-in forms to make sure that if anyone has any questions, they're very clear on what that is. And just a reminder, if you'd like to reach out to me, you can send a message to info@ABODEbucks.com. About 40% of our investors are from outside of St. Louis, and they like the fact that there's a lot of beautiful low-cost historic homes. We have a really good track record for people coming back to St. Louis and spending their time with their families here. It's affordable, and most importantly, the short-term regulations are very industry friendly. So. If there's anything we can do, you can either send me an email or call me, and I'm happy to help.
Thank you very much for that, Josh. Definitely raising a lot of really good points around, protecting yourself on the front end of the reservation, but also there are things that we can do with smart home kind of automations and tracking to protect us mid-stay or throughout the stay while the guest is there, should they have snuck through our kind of screening defenses prior to that. So to talk a little bit more about those defenses, we'll move to Ella.
I'm Ella Majiborski. I'm one of the co-founders and CPO here at Autohost. Some of you might know, so Autohost is a guest screening and automation platform. So we basically help assess the risk of reservations, and then we help automate the vetting process. So everything that goes into screening your guests, removing the manual and inconsistent processes out of it. So Josh kind of touched on many of the bad things that can happen from bad guests. So I guess integrating guest screening into that tech stack is something that we're extremely passionate about. So I'm just going to go over some of the what, how, and why around this. So first of all, why do you need guest screening? So I think that everybody's aware that you need a certain level of guest screening. When you're just starting up, it might be as simple as asking some questions and making sure you're doing a little bit of vetting. But once you start growing and seeing scale, it's really where the systematic process that's going to be important to your overall flow. And so guest screening really is that first line of defense. You should have many of them starting with guest screening and anywhere from mid-stay stuff and post-stay consequences. But being the first line of defense is your first way to kind of have that essential component, make sure that the guests that are entering your property are being vetted right off the bat. The other thing that automation of guest screening lets you do is the due diligence. So as you grow and scale, keeping things consistent and systematic and being thorough with every guest becomes harder and harder. So automating that guest screening process lets you do the due diligence without the actual manpower. You want to make sure that you're collecting information, that they're agreeing to rules, that you're vetting IDs, that you're running checks, that you're collecting security deposits, and all of these things really need to be done systematically. And so the due diligence is extremely important here. The other benefit of screening your guests right off the bat is really filtering. So the bad guests that we were talking about, and that goes on a very large scale, anywhere from gray area of a party to vandalism to the more extreme elements of fraud and illegal activities and drug smuggling and sex trafficking and things that, unfortunately, as companies grow in scale, they become more and more familiar with. The filtering right off the bat is a really important part. So once you filter them, you get to focus on guest experience. You're not there to be a bouncer. You want to provide your guests an amazing experience, but you want to make sure you filter out the bad ones right off the bat. And the last one that is really worth mentioning is de-risking reservations. And we use that a lot because the point is that that gray area I was referring to can be anybody. So if you have a property that can fit 5, 6, 8 people, that by definition is a party. So it's not that you don't want to let them in, but having proper screening in place, collecting that information, the guests know that they're liable for their stay, and you end up de-risking the reservation, hopefully then avoiding the need for any dealing with issues or jumping on parties. So the de-risking element is really important, and we find that a proper guest screening process helps you do that. And so the guests that end up staying with you might be the same guests, they just end up being better guests. So that's extremely valuable. Other than general importance of guest screening, we do have a unique situation at the moment. So I wanted to touch on COVID and how things are even more emphasized. So the point is this: so when the economy is down, crime and fraud are up, and that's a fact, and we see that. And so even though reservations might have decreased, the general element of crime and fraud are up, and so we need to be ready. And so guest screening and not letting it get to place where you can't handle it, doing the guest screening right off the bat is extremely important. To go along with that, we have businesses that are trying to keep their bottom line. And so the risk tolerance, what you're willing to let go with, your gray area of your comfort zone might have increased a little bit because you need your business to survive. So when you combine those two things together, crime and fraud are trying to book it. Operators are kind of being a little bit more loose on their booking restrictions because they need the business, they want it in. And so we're not saying don't do it. You just need to be really, really thorough and proper with who it is you're letting in. And then the other thing to touch on that is very pandemic specific is that we've unfortunately seen a lot of cases in the past year of abusing the excuse of the pandemic. It could be chargeback fraud, where again, operators are being too loose and not screening off the bat, or even things like claiming to self-isolate or false quarantine claims. And then we had operators, unfortunately, dealing with squatting, which in the short-term rental space, we're not really familiar with. Long-term landlords might be a little bit more equipped to handle that. So that's been an issue. With the pandemic as well, there's actually a really interesting statistical misconception I wanted to bring up. So there's this perception where if overall you have 100% of your reservations, and let's say for the sake of really simple argument, 20% are risky or bad guests, we kind of think that if the reservations go down, then everything goes down proportionally. So if there's less reservations overall, there's also less risky reservations, and so on. The unfortunate situation is actually this. So even though your reservations end up going down, the risky ones remain the same, if not even increase. So the decrease is the good reservations. It's the families they used to fly over, or even business travel they used to book with you. So even though the overall number decreased, you need to be very much aware that now during a pandemic, during times of uncertainty, you need to be a lot more wary of possible risk, of possible elements and attempts to abuse. We don't want you to just leave money on the table and go better safe than sorry and not accept anyone. It's just really important to make sure you do the screening off the bat. The next thing I want to touch on, and that's a big thing also that we kind of had in discussions with Guesty, is the benefits of automation. So tech stack is important. You guys are all here because you're using tools and software, you're working to scale your business. And so automating the guest screening process is really a big part of it. So the point is that scaling is easy with automation. If you have agents processing manually, the more you grow, the more agents you need, the slower the process becomes. There's also an element of being systematic. So you have stakeholders. You don't want to have guests or situations slip under the cracks or kind of fall through little hoops. And so the fact that when the process is automated, you get to be consistent and every single guest goes through the same process. It's nicely branded. It's well positioned. The good guests don't think it's weird because we're used to going through a check-in process. We've all been on flights once. And so being systematic and consistent as you grow and scale is really important because you can control your team of guest support agents being that consistent when they go through it manually. That does lead to the fact that fewer agents can do more. So when you automate the screening, and I'll explain a little bit about how AutoHost works, but the point really is that we want to draw your attention to only the risky reservations that require review. So we want to avoid the mundane and kind of the tedious work of asking back and forth, especially where sometimes there's elements that your team might not be qualified to spot lies, and they can really focus on problematic areas. So less agents can do more important things rather than tedious work. The fact that the process is really simple for guests is a huge plus, and they see it as a professional check-in process. So we see that part of automation also play a big role. And last, but really not least, is that as you grow and scale, it's extremely important to remove biases and discrimination. So looking at an automated process, you get to make you get to make actual calls based on data points and based on practical factors rather than a guest looks sketchy or something doesn't feel right or they entered a question a certain way. And so we're also finding that as companies grow, being able to keep their moral compass and know that you're not using any discrimination in your screening process is extremely important. I can wrap up a little bit just talking about that automation of how AutoHost does things. So we really come in automating that screening process. So like I said, we have an element of assessing the risk of a reservation, and therefore the vetting goes through AutoHost. Guests will be agreeing to rules and uploading their ID to be vetted. We'll be cross-referencing data, making sure nothing is fraudulent about their activity, taking a security deposit, agreeing to rules, providing names. But all of that can be really, really time intensive when done manually. And so the inconsistency, the difficulty to scale that you have with a manual process is really what we aim to solve. So AutoHost fits into your flow, integrated with Guesty as kind of removing that black box that is the guest. So we're helping reduce those general risks, we're eliminating the bias. And the point really is that you can grow and scale and focus on your revenue rather than worrying about incidents. And that kind of wraps it up. So whether you are already having issues or trying to be proactive, you can definitely reach out to us. We have a very strong partnership with Guesty, and we'll be happy to talk. So you can reach out to us at sales@autohost.ai.
Well, thank you very much for that, Ella. I think I am thoroughly frightened by one of your slides in which you indicated that fraud in guest screening is not a linear curve to the amount of reservations. The fact that you're still seeing the same amount of bad actors coming in, regardless of what your reservation volume is mildly terrifying, at least for me.
Agreed.
Just know that that exposure is still out there. All right, well, thank you, Andrew, Josh, and Ella for kind of walking through your offerings, for sharing some of your experiences. I know that it was very enlightening for myself. And what I'd like to do now is just kind of continue the conversation a little bit more free-flowing for us to just kind of, speak amongst one another in more of a panel format. And so I guess, why don't we start with a general question for the three of you. We can go in order of Andrew, Josh, and Ella in answering this question, which is, we've seen this trend throughout COVID of basically the demand to book from a PMC's direct website has kind of picked up. And as that demand of direct bookings has picked up, PMCs don't really know how they feel about it because they're offered certain protections from some of the OTAs, and now they're taking on those protections themselves. And so I guess the question is, do you see this trend continuing? Do you see direct bookings continuing? And then how should PMCs feel about these direct bookings, and what should they be doing in order to protect themselves? Andrew, we can start with you.
Sure, I absolutely see this continuing. It's why we're seeing in the news that VRBO and Airbnb are starting to really try to take care of the hosts and the property managers, which we haven't necessarily seen over the past years. And so what I see is with high demand, now we're not as dependent on the booking sites for demand. The demand's coming to us anyway. So there are just a few other components of that we need to take care of to really you mitigate any value that that booking site had. If the demand's there, then you need a solution like Safely or AutoHost to make sure you have the right protections, you have the right screening of the guests coming in, and then you can run your business and have the independence away from the booking site. So I really think the trust and safety solutions are the missing piece that allow you to start to run your business off platform. Now, that'll change. It's a pendulum. It'll go back. And then in times of low demand, well, you need the booking sites to send you guests. And then you'll become dependent on them, but it should be your decision. And so filling in the gaps with services really, really help you run your business a little bit more independently.
Yep. Yeah, I think that you're exactly right. And you hit on a key term, which I think, some of our OTAs have really kind of hung on to, which is the term of trust and safety, right? And this kind of standardization of kind of the guest reservation process and certain securities in place. And what we've realized is that you could have as many trust and safety protocols as you want, but it doesn't necessarily guarantee a good guest coming to stay with you. And so kind of transitioning the question to you, Josh, how do you feel about kind of, direct bookings coming in? Do you feel more exposed in that situation, or do you feel comfortable that your organization is equipped operationally to handle kind of that added element without the OTA protections?
Yeah, I mean, the reason why we ended up with Guesty is because we, were interested in building our own brand. Dealing with the OTAs can be, difficult at times. And so we figured that if we could build our own brand and be less dependent on, these booking channels, then we're going to be in the pole position. The problem is, and the thing that really had our heels dug in is we had no protection. Like you said, there's no insurance. So what do we do? And we searched all over, and that's how we found Safely. And yeah, everything's working perfectly. We have our direct booking website. We're getting about 10% of our monthly bookings across our entire portfolio are from our website. And we've only had it live for, 5 or 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
And when something goes wrong, then Safely is there for us. So that's, we feel comfortable and we're excited about it too.
Yep, that's great. And then Ella, for you, are you seeing that I don't know if you guys break down your data this way, and so I apologize if you don't, but do you see potentially more fraud or more fraudulent guest opportunities coming through the direct booking channels, or are you seeing the same kind of distribution across OTAs and direct website booking?
So it's an interesting question. At the beginning, when a company expands into direct bookings, the answer is yes. Once they get a handle on their process, the answer is actually no. So the original question of, are they here to stay? It's absolutely, because companies are seeing the value. It's an eye opener. You get to keep more of your profits. But it is true, you touched upon an important point, that when you just open up a site to be booked, you don't get an inquiry. You don't even have an Airbnb profile where, let's say, for the majority of the time, you can supposedly trust some of the reviews and that the person is who they say they are. So at the beginning, direct booking is a very easy target. Mm-hmm. Mind you, though, introducing processes can help a really simple filtering of the issue and the fraud. So simple fraud would be people faking IDs or using stolen credit cards or things like that. And so the biggest thing with a direct booking is that now you're in charge of your own payment, and chargebacks are big and you want to avoid them. So the answer is yes, but once you introduce those processes, you make sure to vet the guests, you collect information on them, you're comfortable knowing who's staying with you, you know your guest, the potential is endless. And I think the companies are starting to build their brand. They're loving it. If somebody stayed with Paul's awesome properties in New York and they had a great experience, and you happen to have places in San Francisco, they don't need to go on Airbnb again. They can just go back to your direct site and just book with you again because they love their stay.
Exactly, and not to mention kind of the benefits of avoiding some of those OTA fees.
Exactly, which can get hefty.
Yeah, exactly right.
Yeah.
All right, Josh, this one's directed at you. And I know from back when conferences were a thing and I'd be sitting, having late night drinks with PMCs, they all love talking about their war stories. And so I want to hear your war story that was the straw that broke the camel's back. That's it. We need to beef up our security. We need to do the guest screening. They stole our fridge. They stole our vanity. Like what happened? How did somebody hurt you, Josh, that brought you to security?
Honestly, it was just a cumulative, and I'll give you a horror story, but really it's just a cumulative number of things over amount of time. And really the only thing that kept us from doing something sooner was just finding it, right? Mm-hmm. I spent so much time in Google searches trying to find a company that could help us and fit our needs. And so that's when we pulled the trigger. But the horror story is New Year's Eve 2019. We heard on the news that there was some gunshots. And in a neighborhood that one of our properties is, and 2 or 3 days later, maybe 2 days later, we started getting notifications from the neighbors saying, "Hey, I think there's something really crazy going on over there." When we went over there, our team member that went with police officers. A few people ran out of the place. They were disassembling a car in the garage. There were gun shells all in the backyard, like from automatic weapons. And it turns out that we got a lawsuit filed because the shooting, although it was apparently not at the property, they were claiming that somebody got actually shot in the leg there. So there was actually a year-long lawsuit, and they lost. And we got the property back to normal and everything else. But then it was like, okay, this is getting serious. So it really, that particular instance really really made us amp up our game, what we're doing to make sure that, bad guests don't make it into these properties.
Okay. Josh,
like I said, that's 8,000 reservations. And that was just one that was really bad. But yeah, it was pretty extreme.
Josh and I did not rehearse this question beforehand. I had no idea that we were going down the route of assault rifles, but yeah, that is an extreme case that's definitely going to kind of cause people to definitely reassess their security measures and everything. And so thank you for sharing. Staying with you, Josh, actually, how do you position your messaging to a guest when they've gone ahead, they've booked with you, you've gone through your screening process, and for one reason or another, they're falling into the at-risk category? What is your communication with the guest at that point, and how do you position that?
Honestly, once they make it through our screening, we're happy to host them. The screening process, we often avoid local guests, unfortunately, unless you have a really good story. The nice thing is that for our prime demographic as vacation family renters, it's pretty easy. I'm a grandparent. I'm going to see my grandkids. We're all going to get a house together. That's going to be an easy one. If somebody says, "Hey, we're just a group of friends looking for a place to kick back for the weekend," we'll probably just deny them right there, because that's not what our prime demographic is. So it makes it a little easier because we know exactly who we want to stay. Mm-hmm. And then from there, we just kind of feel them out. Like Ella said, maybe that's not the best way to do things. We take discrimination, booking based on, race or creed or culture very, very seriously. And we want to get all the best guests in there. But I don't know if it answers the question, but it's basically just a really strict vetting process in order to get in the property.
But let's say that you've gone through the vetting process and someone is in the do not accept reservation pile. What do you specifically communicate to them in that instance?
In that case, we just say, it's just, you're cutting them loose. And so it doesn't have to be a whole lot. You can just say, we've reviewed your profile and decided that we don't feel comfortable with you staying. And you can just, you can cancel the reservation, and you can tell Airbnb and Vrbo that's why they're not going to stay. And it doesn't, if that is the case, they're not going to ding you. You're not going to lose Superhost status.
Yeah.
So it really doesn't, that really doesn't happen. I feel like our vetting and screening is so good that it rarely happens that we miss somebody. But if that's the case, we can just say, sorry guys, hope you find a better place that'll fit your needs.
Okay. All right, Andrew, a question from the audience came in, which is, do you find that removing damage deposits and replacing them with an insurance waiver takes away guest incentives to be good actors or good characters in the home? And if so, how do you position kind of the damage waiver fee with potential guests?
Yeah, and early on, we were really worried about that. It's like, do I have a blank check so I can go party? I mean, this is the best $10, $30 I've ever spent if I can go crazy. We're not seeing a difference in how a guest behaves. So we have some property managers who don't pass this cost to the guest. They pay for it themselves. The guest doesn't really know they have the insurance policy, and we're seeing the same types of bad events, the same frequency of bad events, whether the guest knows or not. I mean, there are some guests who are just motivated and they're going to be bad, and that's why you need a good screening solution, no matter what. And they're not really thinking ahead of time about how they're going to pay for whatever happens. It often gets out of hand, and so we're not seeing it. That said, with any sort of volume, there starts to be fraud here and there, and so we monitor that. But so far, we haven't seen a change in behavior.
Okay, so no material change or impact. And how are your guests presenting the fee on the reservation? Are they internalizing it into the total host payout? Or is it a special line item that they're putting in on the OTA? How are they presenting it? Is there awareness around it?
Yeah, most present it as a line item, and often it's added into the management fee. But then in the house rules or the home description, they describe we built in this extra fee into the management fee. This replaces the damage deposit, is powered by Safely plus Guesty, and that is how it's presented. So we do want to make sure they know this is, instead of you putting down a damage deposit, a refundable damage deposit, because then they're like, oh, okay, this makes sense. I'm very comfortable paying this amount because I don't want you holding my money, even if it is refundable, because I know my family's fine, but the other family I invited, I'm not paying for their stuff. So in general, they're happy, but we need to have that a good description so they understand that this is a value adding fee versus just one more junk fee that we see across the industry.
Yeah, I think positioning it that way is kind of critical for the success of the fee and it being accepted by any potential guest.
Exactly.
All right, Ella, what percentage of bookings get rejected and how many have to be canceled only because guests didn't want to provide the information, right? I think that this is a common concern that we see, at least on the Guesty side, which is we're trying to reduce these barriers of entry for our guests. And with that streamlined effort, we're finding that maybe we're uneasy collecting security deposits, or maybe we're uneasy asking them for additional kind of verification information. So does that stop a lot of the guests from what you've seen?
So the quick answer is no, at least not the good guests. So what percentage of reservations end up getting declined or canceled? And that is what I responded. It's really up to you. So it's a matter of the property manager's risk tolerance. Are you using AutoHost more for the de-risking element? So majority of guests are good guests. You want to know who's entering. You want to have all their information. You want to do your due diligence so that when it comes to if something happens, or just even for the sake of the de-risking, you need to have everything on file. So in many instances, you don't have to decline a reservation because something was flagged. It just means that you're going to go ahead and manually review it and make a judgment call. In terms of guests not willing to complete information, straight up, the answer is always, there's a reason why they're not willing to provide something. So if you're going through your online check-in for a flight, you're not going to stop at the date of birth and say, oh, no. I'm not providing that. I'll just cancel my flight. So the point is that guests that are looking to stay and there's no issue with the reservation, everything is done really professionally and it's branded with your company, and sensitive information like credit card ID, things are encrypted. And so when guests go through the process, on the contrary, it's a very professional flow and they see it as simplifying their check-in. There definitely are times where somebody reaches a point where they're not willing to proceed. We actually are able to see which stage they dropped off. So let's say they clicked on agreeing to 3 of the rules, but then the last one of, no outside guests allowed, they just dropped off. They weren't willing to click on it. So that now becomes your topic of conversation with a guest, that if you were going to have a gathering, this might not be the right place to do it. So guests that choose to cancel because of the screening process, as far as we and our clients are concerned, that's actually a success. So you're not trying to have them stay despite your rules. You want to make sure that if this isn't the right place for you, go ahead and cancel, no problem. We don't want you here. This is not the place you want to stay.
Yeah. I mean, that's exactly right. Like if somebody's not willing to take that extra step, then that's maybe a stronger indicator of their guest quality than even any screening could potentially do at that point. So I want to basically, this will be the last question. It'll be for you, Ella, and for you, Andrew. Give your messaging to the DIY PMCs out there, the ones that say, man, I can do my own guest screening. What are some of the pitfalls of kind of having that DIY approach, and give them at least one nugget of something that they could do on their own that could potentially help in their process until they get to the point where they want to enable an auto host very safely. And so we'll continue with you and then throw it to Andrew.
Sure. I mean, I'll start by saying that it's amazing and you should do it. So way before you're ready to be big enough to introduce a tool for automation, do it manually, do it yourself. It's way better than not doing it. And by the way, I ran a property management company and we started with a manual process, and then the manual process turned into, okay, let's use some judgment calls. I mean, if it's, an older couple coming to visit their daughter at university, don't bombard them with how they can't have a party and bring in a subwoofer. But, in other cases, start using your judgment. So I will say that when you grow and scale, using judgment becomes harder and you want to automate for systematic process. But before that point, use your judgment, ask the right questions, empower your guest support agents to do that back and forth. I will say things like, don't ask for IDs to be emailed or collect full credit cards that are not encrypted, because that's, a violation and illegal and a problem. So in those cases, using mostly platforms like Airbnb and Vrbo are a good way to guarantee payment. You don't have to use credit cards and things like that. So just really those questions and due diligence. And then I'll say that, as I mentioned, that AutoHost is your first line of defense. Don't underestimate the next ones. So it could be somebody's, I'm not really certain, but I don't want to just leave the money on the table. Arrange an in-person check-in. Make sure your noise sensors are up. Have insurance in place. So have all of these different points to put the equation together so that you're as safe as possible. In terms of the problem with doing it manually, I would say it's really the systematic element and automation. As you grow and scale, you want to do things that more growth can be handled rather than hinder your operations. And if you're too dependent on manual processes, you might get stuck in moving too fast, and you're just forced to keep doing things manually and therefore inefficiently, including human error. So just find a sweet spot. I'm going to say 20 units is where things are getting a little bit out of hand, and you should free up your time and have majority of the guests go through proper screening. The ones that need attention, you'll give them that attention. Once you grow past the 20 property mark, it's pretty hard to do on your own, or have a team of agents do it consistently.
Perfect. And then same question to you, Andrew. What advice do you have for the DIY, and why should you not DIY?
Well, a lot of the same things that Ella said. I think you're like how you feel about guests, like you get a feeling about some of them. Josh mentioned in-town guests, like always high risk. We've seen a lot of success when you just call the guest and just say, I live nearby, just so you know, in case you need anything. or you have that, you're feeling a little worried, and maybe that's when you drop cookies off every night, or change the air filter, or do those things that just show that you're closer by. So you can depend on your on your instinct, and the longer you do it, the more that's going to be relevant. It's not scalable, but it certainly is valuable. But we find those conversations you have with the guest, it's just like, you understand you cannot bring more than 6 people in. And then they'll be like, oh, okay, and I'll let you cancel if you want. And oh yeah, me, I think I got busy and now I'm not going to come. But just being proactive is really helpful. The one thing though that you have to be careful about is, if you have screening rules, you apply it equally across everyone. So it's not like you're only screening people who might be a member of a protected class. So it's like, no, if they come from in town, this is how I treat them. Versus, I just do, like, people who look weird, I do extra screening for them, or I give them extra friction. You have to be careful. It's really hard to do that when you're doing these one-off like investigations, but it's just something to stay aware of.
Yep.
The idea of I live nearby, when things got kind of like weekend party suspicion, we took it to the next level and just said that, just to let you know, the neighbor's a police officer. So we kind of, you don't have to live nearby, but the neighbor next door, and then many would cancel.
Okay. That's really interesting, just by dropping one little line like that. Josh, how many 2 a.m. cookie deliveries have you done?
Yeah, if I'm up at 2 a.m., you're not getting cookies.
That's right. That's probably the right approach. Well, I'll leave the panel there. I want to thank you very much, each of you, for the participation, for the openness, and for kind of talking through your offerings with us. We do have our Guesty conference in Tel Aviv towards the end of September. And so if you're a Guesty user or a Guesty prospect, or want nothing to do with Guesty but are in the STR space, we strongly encourage you to come. We have representation across our entire marketplace there, as well as a lot of PMC operators, and it's a great opportunity to go ahead and network within the STR space. So hopefully the world and the vaccines and everything collaborates with all of us, and we can get out of our homes and get to Tel Aviv in late September. And I would, really appreciate seeing you guys there. Thank you for joining, and hope everyone has a great rest of their day.